crafty peeps, my name is Kat and I'd like to welcome you to my channel and to the Hot Mess Express that is today's card. This card has truly tested my limits and I almost gave up on it, at least twice. If you struggle with crafting, rest assured you're not alone. If you want to see how I fix all of my mistakes, stick around until the end. First, let's go over the supplies. I got some Neenah 80-pound cardstock, the new to me So Sorry stamp set, and the coordinating dies from Simon Says Stamp. I think this has been out for a while, but it's my first time using it. And I also got 4 Distress Oxide inks here. Full list of the supplies will be linked in the description box below. As you might have already guessed, this is going to be a sympathy card. A friend of mine recently had to put her dog down, so I wanted to make a rainbow bridge card for her to show some support. We're gonna do some ink blending today, and I have my Altenew 9x12 sticky mat and some mint tape. And I just taped off the area where I want my ink blending. I didn't bother measuring anything, and spoiler alert, this will come to bite me later on. So the idea here is to do a pastel rainbow to resemble a rainbow bridge. I'm bringing out my first color. This is Spun Sugar, and I got a foam ink blending tool. It's essentially a handle with a Velcro sticker attached at the end, and it usually comes with the domed sponges that you can switch out and replace when they wear out. And to avoid inky fingers, I like to use my reverse tweezers. So I loaded up my foam with color, and I'm starting by angling my tool slightly upwards and starting my blend in a circular motion ever so slightly off the edge of the paper, like on an actual sticky mat. This is just to avoid the harsh lines and splotches on my paper. I'm applying minimal pressure at first, and then once I got a bit of color on, I can go onto the cardstock more and start applying more pressure. When I'm reloading the tool with more ink, I'm careful to start on the actual masking paper first, then drag the ink onto the cardstock itself. Again, that's all just to avoid splotches. I have 4 colors to work with today, so I need to make sure I leave enough room for the other 3. When I brought in my yellow, I started off on the masking tape, actually not the cardstock. And I first put down some color next to my pink without much blending, so you can kind of see the pretty harsh transition. That's actually totally fine. I first want to put down some solid color, and once I'm happy with the amount, I can go back to my transition and blend that out. So I grabbed my pink foam tool, and with whatever was left on it, I'm going back right over the line where my pink and yellow meet. And I'm just going back and forth to help smooth that transition out. If I feel like I need more pink, I add more pink. If I need more yellow, I add more yellow. So I'm really just going back and forth until I'm happy with the results. One thing to look out for here is cross-contamination on your ink pads. Since I dragged my pink tool on the yellow ink, my foam is now essentially orange. If I was to go back into my pink pad, this will leave traces of that orange on it. So when I go to use it next time, I'm not gonna have pink. It's going to be a different color. So to avoid that, I'm just rubbing my foam tool on paper towel to get rid of the orange. And once I cleaned it enough and no more orange comes off, I can go back to the ink pad for more ink. The process is pretty much the same for the rest of the colors. You lay down your color first until you're happy with the amount, then you go back and forth on the transition line until you're happy with your blend. And don't forget to clean up your foam tools in between. Please keep in mind that this video has been edited down and sped up in some portions, so this is not at all a real-life representation of the entire ink blending process. It takes me a hot minute to get it down in real life. My honest experience with ink blending is that it's not the fastest and it can take some effort, but I somehow find it almost therapeutic. My main tips here are: first, have patience and be ready to put in some elbow grease. Second, use lots of ink. The more ink you put down, the easier it is to blend. Third, overlap your colors as much as you can. And probably the 2 most important ones here: pick your colors wisely, and most importantly, remember to be kind to yourself. Like all things, this takes practice. When I say pick your colors wisely, I mean that colors that are close to each other on a color wheel or on the rainbow are usually much easier to blend. If you think of your typical Roy G. Biv abbreviation, right? So red, orange, and yellow are next to each other, so red should be pretty easy to blend with orange. And orange is easy to blend with yellow. You could skip maybe one color in between and still get a decent blend, like blending red into the yellow will give you orange in itself. But I would not skip more than that at a time. Like if you were trying to blend red into the green, which is the next on the rainbow after yellow, you will just get muddy brown. So just keep that in mind when picking your colors for blending. Okay, so I have my panel finally ready and I'm gonna spray it with water to get the splotchy effect. One of the oxide properties is that they're highly reactive with water. If you spray some water on them and then blot them with the paper towel, you're gonna get this really cool kind of bleached effect. So that's exactly what I did. And this is the moment things started going south with this card. As I peeled off the second piece of my masking paper, I saw this pretty significant big splotch of yellow-green ink on my white area. It's not as noticeable on camera, but you definitely see it in real life. There's too much ink for me to try to buff or sand it out, so unfortunately for me, I will have to redo this whole thing. I grabbed another blank panel, taped things off again, and of course didn't bother checking if my lines were straight because who needs that? I won't show the ink blending process again because otherwise we'll be here till midnight, but here's my second attempt at this panel. And there's that mistake again, this time on top. At this point, I haven't yet noticed my second mistake, so I will still attempt to save this panel. That white thing that I'm holding is just a nail buffing block that you can get at any beauty supply or even at the dollar store, and it really comes in clutch for taking care of little ink smudges. This is where I noticed my second mistake. My lines are not at all straight because measuring, we don't know her. My area with blue and green is visually wider than the area with pink and yellow, and maybe if you don't look too close, it doesn't jump out at you straight away, but something about this panel just looks off, even if you can't quite put your finger on it. You guys, I just wanted to cry at this point. So I had to redo this again, almost in tears, but this time I brought out my T-square ruler and measured out the center of the card, and I am taping it in a triangular shape now. I am making sure that the corner of my masking tape covers the exact corner, bottom corner of my cardstock and that it extends up to the mark line that I did. And because we now know that I cannot be trusted not to make things dirty, I'm taping everything off so that there's no white peeking through, not even a chance. So here's my third attempt at this panel. And let's peel and reveal and see if it looks okay this time. And it actually does. Yay. So we're finally moving on to the next step of the card, which is to make a little paw print. And for that, I'm using a stencil. This one is quite old. I don't truly remember where I got it from. If I can find it in my purchase history, I'll link it in the description box. And I'm bringing out my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. This is a pigment ink and it's just really, really opaque. So it's going to give us a better coverage over oxides so no color is peeking through. So I have smaller brush and I'm loading up the brush with ink and going over some of the openings of the stencil. I kind of want to make it look like the paw prints are going up the rainbow bridge slash rainbow road. Okay, so I am done with my first piece of it, and now what I have to do is shift the stencil and continue blending the other areas. Now, what has possessed me not to clean the stencil from highly pigmented black ink in between, I don't know. But people, please learn from my mistakes. Each time you need to shift the stencil, please clean it off from all the extra ink. And use alcohol to do it. It actually evaporates faster, and this way you don't have to wait for the stencil to dry. So we're almost done here. I am finishing up the last paw, and I'm gonna pull the stencil off. And ta-da! I present to you mistake number 3, another big splotch of black ink this time. Like, guys, at this point, I have seriously started to question my life decisions. Should I even make a video out of this, given how many mistakes I'm making? But thing is, when I'm watching other creators make cards and I see that all of their projects are coming out perfect, I often forget that all of the mistakes are simply edited out of the videos. And it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, well, no one else seems to struggle but me. And that can feel like, I don't know, isolating in a way and definitely discouraging. So my hope here is that by posting all of my mistakes on the internet, maybe someone will watch it and feel like they're not alone in their struggles. So if you've watched my video this far, thank you for being here to witness my mistakes in all of their glory. I hope it makes you feel less alone in your crafting journey. And if you struggle with crafting, leave me a comment below of what your current struggle is. Maybe I can offer some tips. Okay, so catching up as to what's actually happening on the screen. I have dried and cropped my panel down and we're moving on to the grading. We are going to do some heat embossing today with gold embossing powder. I got my MISTI with a blank panel inside and I'm just arranging my stamps. I originally settled on the no card can make this better sentiment, but I'll also stamp some additional greetings in case I change my mind later. And since the stamps are brand spanking new, never been used before, I need to first condition them to remove the manufacturing residue so that they stamp better. You can use your finger for this, but I also have this alt new conditioning eraser, so I just dragged it across all of my stamps, and I don't know how I feel about this one yet. I think it works pretty good for priming, but I also find that it leaves the shavings on the stamps, so you need to make sure that you clean the stamps before stamping. And here I almost forgot. Before we stamp with our embossing ink, we need to apply some anti-static powder. This is really the secret for making sure your powder doesn't stick where it shouldn't stick. There are many forms of this tool, but I think the brush format is the most convenient one here. So I tap my brush to disperse some powder and I brushed it all over the panel. If there's any excess powder, I just gently blow on it to remove it. Once the cardstock is primed, we can ink up the stamps and get to stamping. I'm using clear VersaFine watermark ink. It's got a very interesting sticky consistency, which is exactly what helps the embossing powder to stick. It's also a very good ink if you want to get a tone-on-tone background stamping on colored cardstock, but a little note here is that it works better for lighter colors of cardstock. So when it comes to embossing, I like to make sure that I got plenty of ink to give the powder a good base to stick to. So I typically stamp at least 2 times, but more often than not 3. The pressure tool that I'm using to help with the stamping is just an air hockey paddle that I got off Amazon. It was super inexpensive and it gets the job done. Remember, if it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. When I tilt it in the camera, you can finally see all of the ink that we have applied. Next, I'm bringing out a piece of printer paper folded in half to catch all of the extra powder. This is Ranger Gold Embossing Powder, and I'm just dumping the jar out on the areas that I stamped. Let the powder sit for just a second to help it stick to the ink. And once you dump it off, you can finally see all of the sentiments. And if you miss the spot, you can always go back and add more powder. To get rid of any stray particles, I first tap the panel with my fingers, and if needed, I will also flick it from the back. But word of warning, if you do it, don't flick it too hard or you can accidentally knock off the powder from the inked areas. I usually take a second to check if all of my stamping has enough powder, and if not, I'll go back in with more. If there are any particularly stubborn particles stuck where you don't want them, you can use a small brush to gently brush them off. I had a couple of stray pieces of loose powder where I didn't want it, so I'm bringing out a tiny brush and I am barely touching the paper here. My goal here is to knock that powder loose and not really move it or touch the inked piece. I will heat set this off screen, but to melt the powder, basically what you do is you let your heat gun run for about 30 seconds to get it really hot, and then you apply the heat to the paper from about 2-inch distance or so. Make sure to keep your heat gun moving at all times to minimize the warping. And here you go. Now all the powder is set in place and we have our beautiful sentiments. All we have to do is cut them out. So I'll bring out the dies, line them up, tape them in place, and run the pen through my die cut machine. Once they're cut, I'll pop them out. That little guy got a little bit stuck there. And look at these beautiful greetings that we have. So now I'm trying to do a dry run and to see which sentiment I like better on the card. Keep in mind that my sentiment also has to cover that black ink splotch that I still have in the middle. I couldn't really sand it down because that would take off the color. But in the end, I'm going with no card can make this better, the original one that I thought. And I just cut a couple of extra backings from plain white cardstock and I'm gluing them together for some extra dimension. I really like to pop up my dies just for that extra oomph on a card. This card is going to be pretty simple in terms of elements, so any extra bit of added dimension is going to work in our favor here. Next, I'm gonna score my card base at 4 1/4, so side folding. If you notice here, I'm using two bone folders. The one I'm scoring with is a regular bone folder, and the one on the right is a Teflon bone folder. The reason I like the regular one is because it has a sharper edge, so it makes scoring easier, but I burnish the card with a Teflon bone folder because the regular one can make your cardstock shiny and it can look a little weird when the rest of your card is all matte. I will check for any overhangs or uneven edges and will trim those down with my trimmer. I stuck a piece of double-sided tape on the inside so that my card stays shut, and I'm doing my last dry run here. And typically I would not put any bedazzle or embellishments on a Sympathy card, but I think this one can be an exception because it's literally a flat panel and a grading. So I went through my stash of shiny things, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not a bedazzle master, and figuring where to put the embellishments on the card is often the hardest part for me. I wasn't really feeling the beads or the sequins, so in the end I settled on the flat confetti discs. I think they work the best here, and I'm just trying to arrange them at least in an approximate fashion of how I would want them on my finished card. Do you guys ever struggle with the bedazzle part? Let me know in the comments. Once all that is figured out, it's finally time to put this card together. I will pop this panel up from the card base using foam tape. This is 3 mm thickness. This is going to create just a little bit of a shadow on the card base and add some visual interest. I usually add my bottom and top pieces first and then split the difference in the middle so the panel is evenly supported from all sides. I happened to cut one of the foam strips too long, so I just trimmed it off and stuck it where there was empty space. The best way to make sure your panel is straight when attaching it to the card base is to put it on while you're standing up. It gives you a better view. If the foam tape scares you a little bit, you can put some glue on the back of it and it will give you a bit of wiggle room to move the panel into the right position. I decided to live dangerously here, so I didn't use any glue. I am gluing on my sentiment while making sure that it covers that black ink splotch from earlier. Once I'm happy with the position, I will press it down to make sure it adheres. Then I'm gonna bring back my shinies, and before I put any glue down, I like to get my final arrangement in place first. With this glue, you don't need a lot. A tiniest bit will hold the embellishment in place, and especially on the panel blended with oxides, you don't want any glue oozing out. This glue will dry clear, but oxides are very water reactive, so if your glue oozes, the ink can start reacting with it because most glues these days have some amount of water in them. And we're pretty much at the finish line here, just some final touches left. I'm gonna remove the tape from the inside of my card and stamp the back of it. As always, my cats get all of the credit here. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you found my struggles, if not helpful, then at least entertaining. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!